Gallente has some of the weirdest looking ships in the game. Take the Celestis or Imicus for an example, but at the same time they also have some very nice looking hulls, like the Megatron or Hyperion, and I would add the Brutix to the good looking ship category. Now the Brutix does have a odd design. It has a very big front end. The front hull is actually huge, while at the back it has these silly little wings that kind of make the ship look like a fish that lives in the ocean, and I will add a screenshot of the fish on the screen. Kinda hilarious. Okay, let's take a look at the trait description. Now the bonus on the Brutix is very nice. The Brutix is using railguns. Both the long range and the blasters can be very useful on this ship. After all, the Gallente is using railguns as their primary weapon. And they also have, the Brutix also has a very nice armor repair bonus. So the Brutix can be very tanky. Overall, I'm very excited to see how much repair can I get out of this ship. Now the Brutix has 7 high slots, 3 medium, 5 low, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. The overall defense is 29,000. Again, the primary tank on the Brutix is armor because of the armor repair bonus. The capacitor is okay, the recharge rate 546 seconds is also alright. The recharge rate per second 14.42 gigajoule per second. It can lock 6 targets. The Brutix is a fairly large ship. It's also not the fastest, but not the slowest. Overall, the speed is, I would say, okay. It is in the acceptable levels. Now I have 900.38 DPS on this Brutix. The first build will be a tank build, a tank PvP/PvE build. The blasters have a range of 5.85 km with the accuracy fall off at 7.8 and tracking is 94.38. Overall pretty good numbers. 1 Scrambler, 1 web and 1 armored command burst. Keep in mind you can fit command burst modules on this ship. 1 afterburner, capacitor battery, dual adaptives and 1 large armor repair. This is a full-on armor tank build. The power grid is also very nicely used. The rigs are also tank rigs, 1 anti-explosive, nanopump and nanobot accelerator. Engineering rigs have capacitor circuits, power grid and semiconductor memory. Basically power grid and capacitor rigs. The nanocore is a Concord Pass nanocore that is easily obtainable. It is the Brutix Exile core. Now this core gives you extra armor repair, which means you can even improve the armor repair capability on this ship, and of course you can take a look at the other stats. The armor repair stat is the way to go, makes this thing even tankier, and overall again you can get some ridiculous tank out of this thing. Now 56,000 hit points is the current value in the station, and overall the stats are nice. Now let's go on to the implants. You have 2 options with railguns. You have the thermal circulation for tank or the high power coil for DPS, and I will go with the tank first because this is a tank build. So the level 15 attributes gives you extra 20% armor resistance, and this is basically the attribute to go if you are going to build a tank Brutix. And here you can take a look at the general units, also focused on armor repair and capacitor battery. And the hit points immediately went up, now it's 62,955, and the armor resistance also went up by 20%. Let's undock and let me show you the active stats of the Brutix. Now of course, with the armored command burst and with any command burst module, always fill the ship with fuel before you undock, and this is something that I failed to do. So let me quickly dock, let me get some fuel for this monster, and then I have to refuel the ship, so don't forget to refuel before you undock. Plasmoids, Okay, where are they? There are they. Move to Brutix. I'll just add some random number. Okay. And now let's refuel, and now I can undock. I almost forgot that little module on this ship. The command burst is very useful for solo and for a fleet. They give you some
Undocking.
excellent buffs that can decide between a victory or defeat. Alright, let me orbit around the station and let me quickly adjust the modules, because the game just loves to mess up my modules every time I undock, and I don't know why it does that. I already mentioned that like 50 times by now, but yeah, the game just loves to troll me, and there's just no other way around it. Now, the Brutix with the afterburner is actually not that slow. It's a fairly fast boat after all. Gallente ships are known to be not slow, but also not too fast. They're speedy, but you know, not minimum speed, but still, they're definitely not slow as some of the Amar ships or some of the other faction ships. The DPS is the same, 91,000 hit points, which is really nice. 79, 73, 74, and 78% resistance. You get decent DPS, you get a decent tank, and again you get decent speed out of the Brutix. 3,186 armor repair every 6.28 seconds. These are some very fat armor repairs that I can get out of the large armor repair. With rig integrations you can improve the armor tank even more. However, I did not go with integrations. This is basically a classic build with normal rigs. Now the thermal implant can also be used as a DPS implant. However, I would say that you should most likely you should use the extra DPS only in some cases. 103,000 hit points is with the armored command burst. It did give some very nice armor resistance and some of the other armor stats as well. Now the thermal implant kicks in at about 70 hit. That's where you will notice the DPS go up, and this is why this implant is good for tank, but I don't really like it for DPS, because it's very easy to lose that DPS. You really have to pay close attention to the hit limit. 1,757.53 DPS with the thermal, but you will lose the tank. After all, the extra tank only works if heat is below 30, 0 or below 30. So that's the catch with the thermal implant. Excellent for tank, but for DPS the high power call is just doing a much better job. Now you can also use the skirmish command. The skirmish command can give you extra web and scrambler range. It can also make your ship a little bit harder to hit, and it also improves the speed of the afterburner or micro warp drive. With this build you can use the afterburner or micro warp drive, both work, but since this is a brawling ship, a afterburner is recommended so that you can maintain some form of speed even if you are scrambled and webbed. Now with the skirmish is actually good if you like to solo PvP with this ship, or if you like to hunt in low sec, because you get extra range, and that extra range can be very important. While the armored command burst can also be used for solo, but it has more application for missions, I would say, and it does have applications in PvP. It can be used in solo PvP for the extra tank. It can be used in low sec for missions, so it also has a wide variety of different purposes. It all depends on how you purpose the module and ship. Now let me see the tank. The tank is okay. Of course there is not going to be the extra armor resistance, because the skirmish does not give you that, but you will get extra performance out of the afterburner, out of the webs and scramblers, which is also a very important stat that you should keep in mind. 16.07 km with webs and 14.93 km with the Scrambler. Those extra 1-2 kilometers can be extremely important. I learned that in EVE Online, and that same thing can be applied in this game as well. Now you can also use the Brutix as a tanky sniper. The Brutix can actually have some really good tracking with the rifled railguns. You can use dual webs, a long range disruptor or a Scrambler, a micro warp drive, one capacitor battery, dual adapters and a large armor repairer. You can also add some tracking disruptor, tracking computers if you need them, but for that you will have to sacrifice some of the modules. The dual armor repair build with a large Nosferatu is also very nice. This works at close range. Overall should be very good on the capacitor, and the capacitor with dual medium armor repairs in some cases is lasting a lot longer. And for the PvP build that I would probably use on this ship, it's something along the lines of this. Now I also changed the rigs. I have the DPS rigs installed and I get 1.7 thousand DPS out of the Brutix, which honestly is really good. Triple magnetic field stabilizers, 1 damage control and 1 micro warp drive, basically a very similar build to the build I use on the Thorax and on the Cinnabal. And here you can take a look at the rigs. You can change the engineering rigs for extra speed or warp core tabs, depends on what you prefer. I prefer to keep the capacitor rigs to maintain the blasters for as long as possible. And with this setup with the DPS build, I recommend that you use the high power coil, although you can use the high power coil with both builds and with both rig setups, both work. It's just that I personally prefer the thermal circulation for extra tank, while I prefer the high power coil for the DPS build. And the setup on the high power coil can be the same. Of course, you can replace the units with the magnetic field stabilizer units, and they will improve the DPS quite a bit. And yeah, you can get some pretty scary DPS out of this monster. 1.9 thousand, almost 2,000 cold DPS on this blaster platform. Well then, let's undock and let's see the maximum possible DPS that you can get with this build. The damage control is basically there to absorb the incoming damage that can be coming from the rats, can be coming from the target. For about 13 seconds, basically it serves to buy you as much time as possible to kill the target. With this build, you focus on killing the target before the target kills you. This is basically the classic low sack build that I use, that many other players use, and it does work really well on the Brutix. This thing, again, has a lot of DPS that you can take advantage of. Now, in most cases, I like to add one passive buffer mode, and I think I'll do that in the next build that I will show you here. 54,000 hit points, which honestly is not bad. 1.4 km per second is not bad speed for a Battlecruiser, and 1.9 thousand DPS. Okay, let's heat up the Implant and let's see how much DPS I can get out of this boat. Almost 3000 DPS with the Implant active. With one magnetic stab, the DPS is 3.6 thousand. With the second one, it's 4.3 thousand, and with the third one, the DPS is 4.7 thousand. This is a lot of DPS, and I love it. Now you will be limited by the range, so you will have to be very close to the target. After all, that's how blasters work. Very short range, but extremely high DPS. 16.07 kilometer range and 14.93. Again, it gives you the advantage. You can scramble them before they scramble you, and that gives you some extra seconds to actually approach the target to be in the optimal range. and when you are in the open range, then you unload the DPS, and this is basically how I run my cruisers in low sec. I scan the target, I land close to the target, and I go full DPS. And you can do the same thing with the Brutix very easily. It works really, really well. Now perhaps you might want to increase the speed. That's one thing that I see that it could be improved, but everything else seems to be okay. Now the build that I would probably use is this one. I have one armor plate. Now the armor plate does reduce the speed and maneuverability a little bit, but it adds a lot of armor. Now I have 27,000 armor. That's a lot of armor, and that's definitely not going to be killed that easily. So it combines tank, and it also combines very high DPS. Not many ships are going to be living for a very long time under the firepower of this monster.
Undocking.
And that's damage control, and the armor plates will buy you enough time to destroy the target. Overall, with this build, I would definitely change the rigs a little bit. Maybe add an auxiliary thruster, maybe add one general unit for micro-drive speed, just to counter the effects that you get from the armor plate. Basically, the armor plate slows down your ship, so you have to keep that in mind. And the DPS will be a little bit lower, but still extremely high. And yeah, more and more I'm starting to like the ship, and I'm actually starting to really like the ship. So there's a big chance that you might see the Brutix in PvP very soon. The Brutix is very cheap, and that's one very good factor about this ship. You get 5,000 DPS for less than 300 million, and that is amazing. 204,000 hit points. Yeah, this is definitely not going to die that quick. That's a lot of armor, and that's also a lot of resistance. Overall, I'm very happy with the results on the Brutix.
Docking request.
And definitely looking forward to see what this boat can do. Now, for high sec missions, you don't need a lot of tank. This is one of the builds that you can use. However, I would say, just to be safe, replace one magnetic stab into one reactive armor hardener, or you can use one capacitor battery. Depends which one you need most. But with this build, you will be able to clear the high sec story missions really well. It will also be very quick because this thing has a lot of DPS, and let's see how the Brutix will actually work. So against some weapon types, I really do recommend that you add one reactive or one adaptive armor harder, just to improve the tank a little bit, and that will definitely reduce the incoming damage that your ship will take. Now this is a tier 10 mission, this is a tier 8 ship, but you know, lately tiers don't really matter. I can clear this with a tier 5 ship if I feel like it, so the tier and the warning that you see when you accept a mission with a low tier ship, you can ignore that. If you have a well built ship and if you are skilled in flying the ship, you don't have to worry about that. You will be clearing it without a problem. Now again, against some missions, against some ships, and against some weapon types, I recommend that you go and add one adaptive or reactive armor or shield hardener, depends on the ship you're flying, just so that you can help the armor repair as much as possible, and of course not to accidentally lose the ship. So here I have the large armor repair that does repair a lot. I mean, the repair capability on the Brutix is absolutely amazing. If not one of the tankier ships in the game, and the Brutix with the right build can be very hard to kill, and I really hope that I end up seeing a lot more tanky Brutix out there. I had the chance to fight with a couple of them, and yeah, they were pretty tanky, but unfortunately most don't seem to be well built for some reason. I mean, I can give you examples of shield tank Brutix that I have destroyed, and yeah, that is kinda hilarious when you think about it. A ship that has fantastic armor repair bonuses is shield tank. Yeah, just don't do that. Just don't do that. Stick to the ship bonus stats. Stick with the ship bonuses, and you will probably not make a big mistake. Now, believe it or not, the Brutix can actually speed tank these missions really well. Again, perhaps one capacitor rig can be replaced with one auxiliary thruster, or perhaps you can use the general unit on the implant to improve the speed. You have a lot of options to improve the speed on this ship. Now, don't be worried about the armor. I know for a second I took a lot of damage there, but it's nothing serious. The high sec missions don't do a lot of damage, although railguns do a lot of damage on armor if you have no resistance. So this is why I say that you should fit one reactive or one adaptive armor hardener, just so that you avoid any uncomfortable potential situations that some of the missions can throw at you. This is not really a mission that you should do with no adaptive or no reactive hardeners, so that's why I'll be taking, in some cases, a bit more damage, but the armor repair can easily repair that. After all, this thing is a armor repair monster, and I'm personally not really worried about the armor on this ship. It easily repairs all damage, and it doesn't use a lot of capacity. Now, I want to talk about the integration rigs. In theory, if I were to use integration rigs, I can get the tanky build up to 91, 98, up to 91 and 93% armor resistance. This is without the yellow hardener kicking in, and I can also improve the armor repair performance with the same build, with the same tank. So theoretically, this Brutix can be a lot more lethal. However, the rig integrations cost a lot, and this is not a very expensive ship. But again, if you want to fit integrations on your Brutix, I would say you can do that very easily. I would say go for it. If you really like the ship, and if you can easily recover the ISK that you spend on the integrations, I would say go for it, because you will be able to create a crazy ship with integrations. Now, I used to run integrations on a lot of my ships, but obviously I kind of stopped using them. No, not stopped using them completely. Some of my ships still have them, but most of my current ships that I fly are fairly cheap. They don't really require to have integrations anymore, because now I changed my gameplay a little bit. I changed the way how I approach things, and I changed some of my tactics. Well, not exactly change them, but I would say improve them. Obviously, I would say I'm playing a lot better than I used to. That's something that I noticed, and because of that, I don't really have the need to use the really expensive modules anymore. All of the expensive modules are now used to basically fund some of the new ships that I will fly, some of the new ships that will be coming to the game as well. So I use basically cheap modules, cheap ships, and I blow up expensive ships with them without a problem. And so far, I think on the PvP aspect of the game, I think I've been doing a really good job. Now back to the Brutix. So far, as you can see here, the damage output is really good. Now, one thing that I kinda don't really like is the range on the Nosferatu. Now, with the general unit, you can actually reduce the range of the Nosferatu so that it improves efficiency. The absorption efficiency can be improved and increased a lot with a general unit, and that way your capacitor will be in a much better shape. Technically, you can increase the range of the Brutix if you sacrifice one magnetic stab into one tracking computer. That's also one very interesting idea. You can combine the tracking computer general unit for range and then orbit around your targets at 13-14 kilometers, and that will be your optimal range basically. You can also run the normal rifled railguns in high-sec missions with the micro warp drive, basically maintain a 30-kilometer orbit, and that will be doing a decent amount of damage to the target. However, for maximum possible clear speeds and for maximum possible clear, well, not for maximum possible clear speed, but I would say for maximum possible tick, I would stick with the blasters just because they have crazy DPS, and you can just orbit at 5 kilometers and basically forget about most of the ships that are around you. The only thing that you should keep in mind is the armor. Basically, don't let the armor too low. Perhaps even a medium armor repair can work in high-sec. Just turn on the medium armor repair permanently, because the medium Nosferatu can easily maintain the capacitor, or even run a large Nosferatu. A large Nosferatu will permanently support a medium armor repair. So I guess you have a lot of options to build the Brutix, and overall this is just one example of how you can use it. I'm 100% sure that there is a lot more builds out there that can do the same thing. In the end, I would say pick the build that works best for you, or pick the build that you feel that is going to be suiting you the best, or the build that you are most comfortable with. In my case, I usually do a build like this when I run missions, and that happens very rarely, but you know, sometimes I do run missions when I live stream or when I just record for something else. I like to run missions with the Macarial or the Space Pan, and I have builds for these ships that are very similar to this one. Basically one armor or a shield booster, a bunch of Nosferatus, webs, Scramblers, and the rest are just gyrostabulars or ballistic controls. Builds that maximize clear time. In high-sec, you don't have to worry about pirates, you don't have to worry about PvP. However, in low-sec the story is much different. Now in low-sec, I'm a little bit torn between the brawl builds with blasters and a long-range micro-drive kite build, because the Brutix can actually be fairly fast, and it can be surprisingly difficult to catch if the Brutix is moving. So for low-sec you have two options. First option, I would say the safer option, is a long-range sniper. with tracking computers, a micro drive, and basically uh, that's one of the ways how to do it. You will have about 100 kilometer range, and your ship will be going about 1.4 kilometers per second, perhaps even faster if you have the general unit for the micro drive output boost. And a ship like that, if you are manually orbiting and if you maintain a no close to reach orbits, which means that you avoid orbiting in a direct alignment with belts, planets, stations, gates, then the Brutix is going to be nearly impossible to catch. Now, the close range brawl build will definitely be more exciting, because in that case you can actually use a PvP build to run missions with. That way, if someone does decide to engage you, you can fight them off very easily, actually. Especially if the pirate is built for maximum DPS. If they're built for maximum possible DPS, there's a good chance that they will be dead, because this is one of those ships that can tank a brawler snowball. This is one of those ships that can tank those crazy DPS ships that are built for low-sec hunting, and the Brutix can actually be a very good bait as well. So with this boat, you really have a lot of options out there, and if you end up losing it by chance, you don't have to worry about it, because the Brutix is after all a very cheap boat, so losing it is not a big problem. It's very easy to replace, it's very easy to fund if you want one. So you can get a Brutix in less than a day of playing. Like in couple hours you can get a Brutix from the market with the highest possible price. But of course, I'm fairly sure that there are some very good deals out there, or you can even ask a friend or corp mate or alliance mate to build the ship for a much cheaper price. That also works. So that would be one of the ways of obtaining this ship. Now, am I going to be using the Brutix for PvP? You know, I'm currently thinking about a blaster ship with high DPS besides the Thorax, and the Brutix is actually a good candidate for that. I already have a Implant for blasters. I don't have the high power club, but I have the thermal circulation, so I can take advantage of that and use it for DPS. And I can definitely replicate this build, so there's a good chance that you will see the Brutix in PvP very soon. After all, I always like to test out some new ships, and if I end up really liking the ship, then it becomes my main PvP ship. You know how I roll. I show you the build over here, and then I use that exact build in combat. That's what I do, and I don't plan on stopping that. So overall, am I satisfied with the Brutix? Oh yes, I am. Is this ship fun to fly? Yes, it is. Is the ship very lethal? Oh yes, it is. I would say the Brutix has the potential to be one of the scariest Battlecruisers that I will fly, and I'm definitely looking forward to see what kills I will get with this. But with that being said, I really hope that you guys enjoyed. As always, I really hope that I could help you at building your own ship, and I really hope that at least I could help you at inspiring you to create your own build for the Brutix. So with that being said, I love you all, fly safe, stay safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.